Welcome, Eric, to the podcast. It's funny because we have you on all about to talk about college admissions and writing. However, I noticed something when I was researching you, and that you're like a story consultant for like Broadway musicals, and you also write musical theater. Like, tell me about that. Like, any shows that we would know?
Nothing you've heard of, sadly, yet. Exactly, nothing yet.
Yet.
Yeah, I studied music in college. I moved to New York City 10 years ago to write musicals, and I've done some of that. I also developed a side gig just doing dramaturgy work, helping shows that are trying to get to Broadway. And that's actually, it's kind of related to the book. It's not kind of, it is related to the book because it's all about storytelling, right? Which is the same thing that I work with kids on in their college essays. But yeah, that's another passion of mine. That's very fun.
Okay, I have to ask, which was the chicken and which was the egg? Is the college counseling, did that come first and then this, and then the storytelling and the musical part of it? Or did the musical part come first and it was like, I got to pay the bills with the college counseling?
It was both, actually.
Okay.
So I studied music in college and I wanted to be an orchestral conductor. And then by the end of senior year, I realized I didn't have what it took to do that. And also I just didn't want to. Once I realized what the job was about.
Doesn't that take like sacrificing your life and like just you have no social life?
Yeah, you have nothing, and you don't really have a home. If your career is successful, you're always on the road, and it was just sort of like, this isn't actually the life that I want. And I come from a Navy family. There's a tradition of public service in my family, and so I decided that I wanted to give back through teaching in public schools. So I sort of started doing music, and then I ended up becoming a social studies teacher for several years. So I went from music to teaching. And I was doing a lot of teaching writing then, and that's when I really got interested and excited about, how do you teach writing? And several years later, realized I was really passionate about musicals and moved to New York City to do that. And yeah, the college admissions consulting and tutoring kids on writing and coaching outside of a public school classroom setting, that started as a side gig. Totally. Like that was how I was, paying my bills in New York. And it just blossomed into something much bigger. I found that I loved the work. And, again, I was kind of doing the same thing. During the day, I was using storytelling strategies on my own shows and helping other people with their shows. And in the evenings, I was working with kids on telling their stories. So it just kind of all blended together over time.
That is cool. It's funny how like career paths change. Like my husband actually went to college to become a piano performance major.
Oh, wow.
And he got into it. He's like, this is going to take all the joy out of piano for me.
Yes.
He ended up majoring in physics.
That husband of yours is full of surprises. That's what I was going to be like.
Surprises. Yeah.
He's an engineer, but he majored in physics and was going to be a concert pianist. Like, what?
Well, you've been to my house. We have a baby grand in the living room,
but
and that's
I
why.
I thought he was just really passionate. Like, and the man lived in Germany. Like,
It's crazy. It's crazy. But I love how you weave in the storytelling aspect to it, and in terms of like college admissions process. Because I remember when I was a senior in high school and I applied to one school that needed an essay, which was USC, and I was just absolutely stuck on what to write. And now I'm watching my daughter, who is a high school junior, and she doesn't even want to talk about college yet because the whole process stresses her out.
It gives
so much. So how have you seen the college application process change since we were kids? What is it like for kids now? It's different.
Well, that's a really good question. It is very different. And, when I work with parents our age, that's sort of one of the first conversations I sometimes have to have is just about how different it is. I'd say one way in which it's different is the numbers. I got very lucky and attended Harvard in 1995. When I got into Harvard, the admissions rate was 12%. This past year, it was 3.6%.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And that's, every other selective school has, you see similar trends in their numbers. So the admissions rates acceptance rates are different. A lot more kids are applying to school. Back in 2019, 1 million kids applied on the Common App, which is the main platform for college applications. By this year, it had gone up 30% to 1.3 million. So that's how quickly the numbers of applicants are rising. And
so
also, go ahead.
It sounds also like schools like Harvard haven't changed the number of people they admitted. Like if there's more people applying, they just haven't changed the number of people they admitted. So chances are lower getting
Exactly.
in, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And a lot of that's about dorms, like at a lot of the private schools, they encourage most of the kids to live on campus, and they have very specific residential life systems. And they just haven't, Harvard hasn't built more dorms, I think, since the 70s. Some of the public schools have, UVA has a lot more housing than it did in past years. Other schools, some of the larger public state schools have expanded.
Okay, so I have to throw in a couple of things here because I have a senior right now.
Mm-hmm.
And what you were talking about with the acceptance rates, okay, so first of all, let me just tell you, my senior is my oldest son, and he wants to major in engineering, computers, cybersecurity. He's not quite sure yet, but he's a tech kid, and this will not surprise you. Joanne, I don't think, knows this. He has a Google spreadsheet that is color coded, and he has it divided by their acceptance rates, their tuition, whether or not they've reached out to him yet, whether or not he has to write an essay, whether or not he has to do both the ACTs and the SATs and all of this stuff that he has to send. And it makes me want to cry. It makes me want to cry. I grew up I graduated high school in 98. I lived in Missouri. We had 13 public universities there. Joanne and I live in Arizona. We have 3 public universities. So I felt like it was so easy. It was so easy to get in college. And I don't know if that was because I was in Missouri in the 90s, if it was because it was in the 90s, but the hoops that my son has to jump through now, I feel so powerless to support him. I see him stress, and I don't want to tell him oh, make your dreams smaller so you're not so stressed. But at the same time, it's I'm having a hard time figuring out how to support him because I don't recognize this process. This is nothing like it was back when we were younger. I don't know if there's a question in there or not.
Well, if I could I wish I could just snap my fingers and fix your situation immediately.
So do
right?
I.
Because it's so common, right? This is what I hear from most of the parents I'm talking to, either professionally or just socially. They are stressed, and they are stressed in large part because their kids are stressed. And because it's so different than it was a couple of decades ago, they're not sure how to best support and be there for their kids. And, 2 things to say. One, I think it's important to understand we kind of have almost 2 separate admissions systems in the United States.
Okay.
If you're not trying to go to a selective school, by which I would say a school where the admissions rate is under 30%, it's not that different from probably when you were, applying in Missouri. And I'm talking about schools like University of Alabama, which has an 80% acceptance rate, Iowa State, which has a 90%, University of Delaware, which is in the 70s. Those are all excellent schools, tier 1 research universities. You're going to get a great education. You can get a great education at all of those schools. And it's not that different than it was when we were kids. Where it's different is if you're applying to the selective schools, which are probably the ones that are populating your son's spreadsheet.
They are. Dang it.
Yeah, that would be the name brand schools, the well-known private schools, but also the big flagship state schools like Michigan and UT Austin. And yeah, that's where parents start pulling out their hair because, they see these lists and they don't know what to do. So it's a very good question. Yeah.
It's a really stressful thing for kids. And I was wondering, actually, when you said that you went to Harvard, I was reading Adam Grant's book, Hidden Potential. And there's so many things that go into a college application that I really want your viewpoint on this too. And that make the student desirable to the university. With his situation, he said that he had an interview and was able to pull out his magic card deck and show he had a skill outside of just straight academics. How much does that matter now for kids these days, that they have a skill that they could show that's outside of academics when they're applying to school?
So that's a really good question. So the reality is these days, if you're applying to selective schools, you kind of need both. It used to be that if you didn't have the grades, a great essay or a card trick or something could get you in. But today,
like Legally Blonde?
Yeah, I would.
Essay.
That sort of thing. I can't 100% say that exactly what happened, but yes, that kind of thing used to happen at these top schools. And, you would have the old Yale admissions officer who was going to take a chance on this kid. Like that sort of thing used to happen.
Yeah.
It doesn't really happen anymore unless there happens to be a large building on the campus with your family's name on it. That's like the only, or you know, you're you're an Olympic level athlete, or you're being recruited for some kind of sport like that. Otherwise, there are just so many kids with strong transcripts applying. You have to have a strong transcript that's competitive at that school. And then that sort of gets your foot in the door, and that gets you to be part of the conversation in the admissions office. And then the next question is, okay, then what would they contribute to our community? So these days you kind of need both.
Interesting. Well, we're going to find out like how you can go beyond that transcript with especially what you write right after this. So, Eric, you have been a writing teacher, and you've been helping kids actually craft their college admissions essays. Something that I've said before brought me so much stress when I had to write mine. So first, like, when should kids get started with this writing process for the essays?
So that's a really good question. You know, if it's the fall, the short answer is now. Like, you know, the sooner you start, the better.
And that's high school seniors, right?
High school seniors, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I read in your book, you have a timeline in there, and you mentioned like if you haven't started by Labor Day, you kind of need to get going of your senior year.
And I would say in an ideal case, the best time to start is late July, early August. When I'm working with my own students, I like to have them going into senior year, which usually starts around Labor Day. Obviously varies around the country, but for my students in New York, it usually starts around Labor Day. Going into senior year with a solid draft of the Common App personal essay, which is the main essay that you'll send to most of the schools you apply to, and supplemental essays for one school. So if you start in like July, beginning of August, you have time to do that. That's in the ideal case. But the reality is, you know, everybody starts at different times. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you just want to start as soon as you can so that you can spend as much time revising.
Oh, yeah. Out here, ready for your mind to be blown? Our kids started school July 17th.
Yeah, they've been in for a month already.
We have modified year round here.
Interesting.
In the Chandler School District in Arizona. So I always love saying that to people from the East Coast because they're always like, "Oh my God!"
Yeah, that blows my mind.
Oh yeah, I hate the 4th of July because by the 4th of July, I've only got a week and then school starts.
You're back to school shopping. Wow. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, most of the Florida public schools start in August, like the second week of August, and that seems early to me. So July. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the latest out here is like that first week, maybe the second week of August. That's the latest schools we have. So it was also, they started on July 17th, and it was 117 on that first day. So
I was going to say, hot. It sounds hot to me, Arizona school in the summer.
It's all air conditioned. That's the like redeeming quality of it. All in air conditioning. So
very nice.
When like we all applied to schools, they didn't have the common application. So like,
nope.
Can you like walk us through like what is the common application? What do our kids need to have for that?
Yeah. Can I just throw in the fact that my kid has to have apps freaks me out. It so freaks me out because I thought that was the app. I'll be honest with you, Joanne. I heard about it last year and I thought it was the application process. So I thought, okay, well, we'll download the Common App because that's what it sounds like to me. Common App application. Yeah, no, not at all.
Well, and this is a common, it's a common misconception that like the Common App, what it is and what it does. So yeah, it's a software app, you know, on the internet, on the World Wide Web, I guess, and it's it's a clearinghouse. It's a national system that most of the universities in the country, not all of them, but most of them use it to sort of centralize their college applications. Mm-hmm. So, and it actually started when I was applying to college. I remember my Harvard application was a common application, but it was the only one. Harvard was the only one that used it. So it actually wasn't common at all. It was just like,
I'm like, don't I feel like an idiot? I didn't realize that, but okay. Well, no, I definitely was not.
No one did.
I was not applying to Harvard either.
Well, and it also wasn't it wasn't back then. It was like I had to fill out separate applications for every other school. So it was like a fake Common App at that point. But now it's real. And most schools use it. There's a couple of exceptions. The University of California system doesn't use it. Georgetown doesn't use it, and MIT doesn't use it. But most of the other selective and a lot of the less selective schools use it. And the idea of the Common App is really great and student-centric. It's, the idea is that you should just fill out this one application and then, check a bunch of boxes and it gets submitted to all the schools you want to apply to. College application process is easy, simple, and done. That's the idea. Mm-hmm. The reality, unfortunately, is that most of the selective schools require you to answer their own questions for your school and write their own essays for each individual school and what's called the supplement for that college. So, I've had parents think, oh, well, we just have the kid do the Common App and it'll be easy. And actually, no, you have to sort of really look and make sure you understand what are the essay questions every school is asking, what's the biographical information every school is asking. It's all on one app, but it's actually there are actually a lot of separate applications within it.
That's insane.
It is. Oh God, yes.
So it's like I'm hearing you say that, and I'm like, so it's really no different than when we had to apply for all of these different schools, because you still have to apply for the different schools, like all the supplemental questions and everything.
For the selective ones, and some schools that want to get more applicants, and there's a number of reasons schools would want to do that, make their supplements very simple. So all you have to do is check a box. And a lot of these larger, less selective schools, like the ones I was mentioning with a 70, 80, 90% admissions rate, they don't have as many requirements on the Common App. But for the selective schools, the ones that people usually come to me because they have questions about, and it's important, like as your son is making his spreadsheet now, it sounds like he's already doing this, but he should be going into the Common App and seeing, okay, what are the supplemental essay questions for every school? And this is really annoying. And it isn't, it's insane that I had to write a book this thick about how to apply to college, right? It shouldn't be that complicated.
It is insane. And I will say, so the other part I have going on is that my son is pretty, I don't know how to say it, but he likes to do things his way, and he doesn't always want input from his parents. I know, he's an abnormal teenager.
An engineer and a teenager who likes to do things his way. I can't imagine.
What? Right? What are you talking about? Yeah, so I don't even know a whole lot about what all he's doing. It's very limited where he'll let me come in and help. For the most part, I've seen my assistants coming in where he's trying to fill out the financial documents. So he's like, Mom, come sit with me and tell me how much you make and tell me this and that. And what's my social security number again? And I'm like, oh, you better start memorizing that, dude, because that is your number going forward.
So Eric, hearing how our kids sometimes won't even accept our assistance in this college application process, I want to know how we as parents can really set our kids up well for college admissions. And we're going to go into it right after this. So let's talk about how can we set up our kids the best for college admissions in that process?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So I think there's a couple of ways to do it. One is I think it is important to learn what you can and educate yourself about the process. Again, because it's so different than it was when we were kids. And maybe not to start by the College Confidential online forums, which can be useful, but a lot of parents find that it's just more stressful to start going there. So not to plug myself, but my book, I think, is a good starting place. The first part of the book, which is, I don't know, maybe 20% of the book, is written with both teens and parents in mind. And the goal is to give you sort of a primer, a background on how the process works, how essays are used in the process, and what admissions officers are actually looking for, which is sometimes different from what we think they're looking for. So I think my book is a good starting place. If you want to do a deeper dive, there's another great book by Rick Clark, who's the head of admissions at Georgia Tech, called The Truth About College Admissions. It's sort of oriented towards families. And the last book I would recommend too, if you really want to go deep and unpack it and find out how the sausage is made, the journalist Jeff Salingo wrote a book called Who Gets In and Why, where he was actually embedded, like a wartime reporter in the admissions offices of several different colleges for a season. And he really writes about what he saw. So that's, I think, a first step is just to do some reading about it. talking to other parents at your school of kids a year or two older than yours who have been through the process. And it can be a very school-specific process. So that can be a great resource for learning more. And also getting to know your school's guidance or college guidance office, maybe getting to know the counselor, just knowing what resources are there, and also knowing what does that person do and is it aligned with what your kid wants? And what I mean by that is this, at a lot of large public schools, it's a lot for a college counselor. It's a lot about triage. Like one person may have 250 or 300 kids a year, and they're not trying to help your kid get into the most, selective college they can. They just want to make sure that like all of these kids who want to go to college get in somewhere and get financial aid. Well, on the other hand, if like there are kids in Manhattan who go to private schools where each counselor has 20 kids or 30 kids, and they're all trying to get them into Ivies, so you have very different situations. So it's really helpful to look at that. It's not like I have never met a guidance counselor that I didn't think was doing the absolute best and just loved the kids and their work, but it's just a question of like, is what they're doing aligned with what your kid is trying to do and what you want to do for your child?
Oh,
it doesn't seem fair in a way that like you have like at these Manhattan private educational institutions that they almost have like agents like going for them and trying to get them into Ivy Leagues.
Well,
where other people don't.
I mean, I can hear you on that. Like I can say, so from a parent of a senior right now that doesn't have I didn't have anybody I could talk to because my son is the oldest of all of my friends' kids. So I didn't have anybody really. I have a sister who has kids that are older, but they went to a smaller school and they had completely different majors they wanted to go into. So like every time I go to her for advice, she's like, I can't help you, Bree. It's not the same thing we had going on. But I can say, for starters, that there's a lot of private resources out there. People like you, Eric, that like parents can seek out and find and hire to help them get more of that personal. And I almost feel like that's going to cost you less than it costs for the private school tuition in Manhattan.
Yes.
But, you get a little bit of that. And then because I know that both Joanne and our kids go to public school here in our local school district. And it's hundreds of kids per counselor. And there's one counselor at my kid's school that does just college support. She was introduced to all the parents at the senior meeting that I went to a few weeks ago. And I have to tell you, I have done a lot of the things that you said not to do. I went onto the forums on Facebook and joined the getting ready for college stuff. And all it did was make me feel like I was behind. And it made me flip out. And my anxiety did not help my son. He was like, go away, Mom, you're killing me. But I have to say,
of course you did, because everybody does that. And it's because the process is confusing and there aren't a lot of reliable, informative sources out there. And so you did what everybody does. So that's a completely normal, natural response.
Well, yeah. And then like we got your book and I wish I had had this last spring. It would have calmed me down because like you said, that first section alone, it was I was telling Joanne, it was such an easy read. Rarely do I can't say that I've ever read another book about college applications that I had a hard time putting down.
Eric, this is so much sense. This is a huge compliment. Like you have no idea how big this is because Bree also is very much against reading.
I'm not a huge reader. I can't sit.
She will say this. Yes.
Yeah, I can't sit and like do a lot. Like I prefer my Audible books and everything. But in reading your book, I found it so helpful because you were very like, I know you all are scared. I know you think it's this, but like one of the big things that really helped me was like you had mentioned and also in the beginning about how this is your college essay is the opportunity to show them why they can like why you are the good fit. They're not looking for reasons to say why they shouldn't accept you. Your college application is giving them the extra oomph of like, this is how awesome this person is outside of their grades. And then I also loved in your book, you have a lot of like questions that start them thinking about what they're going to write about. That gives them a lot of that like brainstorming process, because I know that as much as I love my son, he has no idea what he wants to write about. And all I've been saying to him is like, listen, the book says you got to be done by Labor Day, and clock's a ticking, dude. It's almost Labor Day. We got to get going on this. But it really, like, you have some really good, and they're simple answers. Like, they're just like, write one word, write one sentence. And taking those pieces really does help, I think, kids to be able to zoom in on what they want to talk about and make it less overwhelming and less scary. So from one stressed out parent, thank you for your book. It has been very, very helpful. It has helped me get a little bit more zen with my son applying for colleges, because while he has some he's applying for in state that are like non-essays, he's also reaching for some Ivy Leaguers. And it's scary as a parent because you want everything to work out well for them, but you can't help them if you don't know what they're going through, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And that's, you know, I've heard so many parents say almost word for word what you said. You know, I'm not a parent myself, so I don't have personal experience of this, but I have a lot of friends who are parents. And, you know, one of the things, and tell me what you guys think, because you actually are parents, you know, one thing that it seems to me that like as your kid gets older, your job as a parent changes, right? Like it's one thing when they're a baby, and then it's kind of a different job when they're a toddler. It's a completely different job when they're a teenager. And now it's shifting again, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, my sense is that, you know, and again, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a parenting expert. This is sort of just based on what I've seen work and not work with families over the years. But yeah, it is exactly what you're saying. You know, it's about stepping back a bit, giving them the room to like carve out their own space, because this is really the beginning. You know, applying to college is the beginning of the process of you know, becoming an adult, or at least it's part of that process. So allowing them to have that their own space, but they're not an adult yet, right? And they still need you there. And, you know, that's actually the kind of thing I've seen really work, is having those sort of check-ins of like, okay, you know, I'm gonna let you do your own thing. If there's not an essay done by Labor Day, like we need to have a conversation about that and, you know, decide what we're going to do, because, you know, so that's the kind of approach I've seen work, is like having those kind of check-in moments like that.
Yeah. And especially like, I think a big thing you brought up there that I want to be clear for parents listening, like the whole checking in on Labor Day thing and checking in on his process, that is only to support what he wants to do. Like I can't come in, like we can't as parents come in and say, you need to apply to 6 colleges. You need to have this, that done. Like all that does is add that. I know Joanne totally agrees. All that does is like,
so there are parents that do that.
Right. So I'm telling you, if that's you and that's the process you've been taking, I'm begging you to take a step back. Take a step back.
Out their own.
Yeah, the metaphor, and this is actually in the contract of families that I work with privately. I put it into there, is that I recommend a student-centered approach. And what that means, the metaphor I like to use, the student is the captain of the ship, or it's like the student, he or she, they are the CEO of their application process. And parents, teachers, outside advisors like me, we're all the board of directors. So they're setting the goals and they're doing the work, and we're just here to give advice and help keep the ship off course, and also notice if it goes off course and then do something about it. But I mean, usually when the parent tries to take the CEO role in this process, I'll just say it usually leads to a lot of friction. That's often not a good outcome.
No,
Eric, these have been such great tips for parents, and especially like those going through the college admission process with their teens. Oh my gosh, like I know I have to start this soon, and I'm definitely going to be digging into your book, or actually I'm probably going to be handing your book to my daughter and being like, here's some help. Here's some help. Let me know where you want me to come in.
Yeah.
What's coming up for you now that you're excited about?
Well, a couple of things. And one, I would just say a tip I've gotten from people who have used the book this year so far, depending on how your family works, try leaving the book out for your kid to find it. So
that's a good idea.
You know, and then they'll pick it up and start reading it
next
themselves.
To it. It might
help. Exactly. Even better.
Starbucks gift card.
That's what I was going to say. Or just put a nice Starbucks right next to it. Right?
Yes,
poking out of the book.
The gift card in it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So a couple of things I'm excited about. I'm excited about the book, which just came out. I've been, you know, it's based on strategies and techniques I've been using for a decade now, and I beta tested it for the last couple of years, but this is the first time like there's actually a book out, and schools and families that I'm not don't know personally are using it. So that's very exciting. And I'm getting lots of feedback from families, which is also really exciting. Another thing is that I just launched a new Substack that's focused on helping parents, and especially parents going through this for the first time, understand the kind of things you were talking about, just understanding the calendar as it unfolds, what they should be focusing on this month, what the checkpoints are, and when, they need to take action if things aren't happening. So that's very exciting. And I'm just excited. Every student and every family I work with, I learn something from, and this book is putting me in touch with more people, and I'm learning more. So that's just really exciting too.
That's awesome. And you mentioned something that you have a PDF for people.
Oh yeah. So this is one thing, one of the things I found is that it's important to know whatever you're in high school, your student is, your child is, there are things you can do to help them prepare for college, and that changes over time. So I tried to put this all into one infographic. It's a one-pager PDF that's a roadmap to college. So if you sign up for my Substack, you'll get a free copy of that. And I think some of my students actually print it out and put it over their desks to sort of, stay focused over the years.
Oh, sweet.
I'll probably print it out today and be like, my son will come home and be like, what are you doing?
What is that?
Yeah.
I'm helping. I'm being helpful.
Well, thank you so much, Eric, for joining us today. And